Abortion rights advocates are teaming up with LGBTQ plus groups to plan a major protest during the Democratic National Convention in Chicago this summer. WBEZ's Claudia Morel reports.
Leaders of Chicago abortion rights and the local chapter of Stop Transgenocide applied today for a permit to demonstrate downtown on August 18th. That's when top Democrats from across the country will be here for their party's national presidential nominating convention. Christy Corcoonian-Rivers is a co-founder of Stop Transgenocide.
We organizers are trying to give increasing reminders of the perilous consequences that are going to unfold for the Democratic Party if our demands aren't met for solid, unwavering reproductive justice.
Corcoonian-Rivers says the groups also want Democrats to guarantee employment and housing protections for the LGBTQ plus community. Claudia Morel, WBEZ News.
New year, new chance for protest groups to raise their voices. Today, a coalition of supporters of reproductive and LGBTQ plus rights outlined their plans to march at the upcoming Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. So why target a party that is generally supportive of those causes?
Many elected officials have sailed into office on the wave of our protests and demands. We are tired of politicians using our slogans as talking points and then failing to deliver.
Representatives from Bodies Outside of Unjust Laws were among the first in line to apply for march permits with the city. Today was the first day to file. The group plans to march on Sunday, August 18th, as delegates are gearing up for the convention. They are calling for national laws to replace the patchwork of state measures restricting access to abortion and gender-affirming care.
Plus, new year, it is an election year, and we have a lot of coverage of Decision 2024 still ahead.
They're already filing for permits for the Democratic National Convention protest sites. I'm Charlie Wojciechowski. What could that convention mean to security here in Chicago? That story is ahead.
Now to Decision 2024 and preparations for the Democratic National Convention coming to Chicago this summer.
People can now start registering for permits to hold rallies during that event. Our Charlie Wojciechowski explains what that means and what to plan for.
On the 9th floor of City Hall,
we have a march permit application here.
The first application is filed for a protest at this summer's Democratic National Convention by a coalition of groups supporting abortion rights and LGBTQ plus issues.
The fact of the matter is the Democrats have used our issues to gain electoral advantage and then given us the bare minimum.
For the first time in 28 years, the Democratic National Convention is returning to Chicago and bringing an estimated 50,000 delegates, attendees, and protesters.
The pressure that a huge, massive number of people, which we have not yet seen be brought to bear, is what we are bringing to the streets so that everybody in attendance at the Democratic National Convention will hear us.
So obviously the security concerns are primarily the protests.
Anthony Riccio should know. As first deputy superintendent, he was crucial in planning the Chicago Police Department's response to the NATO protests in 2012.
Pretty much everybody who attended NATO attended some degree of training, and it's important to get that training going now.
But Riccio cautions the world is different now than it was, and Chicago could see protests tied to international issues like the war in Gaza.
It's a much more dangerous world.
Riccio, who now heads up public safety for Monterey Security, says he thinks Chicago will be ready for the DNC and the protests it will. In addition to the permits for the protests, the groups also filed for a permit for a march Sunday, August 18th, starting right here at Water Tower Park. In the city, Charlie Wojciechowski, NBC 5 News.
A coalition of reproductive and LGBTQ plus rights groups announced plans to protest the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago this summer. The groups gathered at the city's Department of Transportation office at City Hall. Today is the first day the city accepts march permit applications. The activists are demanding Democratic lawmakers do more and call on the mayor to approve their application.
We are tired of politicians using our slogans as talking points and then failing to deliver. Enough is enough.
Our challenge to Mayor Johnson is respect people's right to protest. No salt trucks, No cops pushing people around.
The groups are hoping to protest on Sunday evening, August 18th. The convention begins the next day at the United Center.
Plan to protest the Democratic National Convention, why a traditionally Democratic group wants to voice its opposition during the DNC in Chicago. With the first votes in the 2024 presidential contest just weeks away, activists are warning Democrats not to take their votes for granted.
WGN political reporter Taman Bradley has more tonight on their message before the DNC comes to Chicago.
President Biden and Democrats begin the year with key constituencies unhappy. Today in Chicago, reproductive and LGBTQ justice activists announced they'll protest at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago to demand more rights.
We are tired of politicians using our slogans as talking points and then failing to deliver.
The president, 81 years old, may also have challenges among younger voters, blacks, and Hispanics. A new USA Today poll shows Biden with just 63% support among black voters. That's down from 87% he carried in 2020. Among Hispanics, he trails former President Donald Trump 39 to 34%. And with voters under 35, Biden is behind Trump 37 to 33%. In the American Muslim community, an Abandon Biden movement is underway. Last weekend, leaders from across the country met in Chicago to slam the president for his unwillingness to call for a permanent halt of the bombing in Gaza.
We won't forget in November. We will not forget all the children that have been killed.
We do this knowing full well that not supporting the president means potentially losing 7 critical states and up to 9 that add up to 133 electoral votes.
Arab American voters could play a key role in deciding close contests in battlegrounds like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. A poll from last Halloween commissioned by the Arab American Institute found the president's support among Arab Americans has plunged to 17%. One potentially positive sign for the president, 29% of Americans say the economy is in recovery. That's an 8-point jump since October. Taman Bradley, WGN News.
A group of activists announced plans to protest the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, arguing the parties failed to protect reproductive and LGBTQ+ rights. Today marked the first day the city took applications for demonstrations coinciding with the August convention. At a City Hall news conference, advocates from the coalition Bodies Outside of Unjust Laws say Democrats haven't stemmed the tide of state laws that restrict abortion access or discriminate against queer Americans, even when Dems are in the majority in government.
Despite the fact that a majority of Americans support the right to safe, legal, and accessible abortion and full reproductive justice, as well as full rights for LGBTQ+ communities, we are experiencing escalating assaults.
Abortion and gay rights groups in Chicago, they are teaming up to protest the presidential nominating convention this summer. We're talking about the DNC, but they aren't going to Milwaukee. They're staying right here in Chicago. They're going to be demonstrating at the Democratic convention. It's coming up in August. This morning they applied for the permit to march. The activists say Democrats have taken them for granted.
You, the Democratic Party, have largely been silent on the rights of trans and queer people, the genocide of Palestinians, the right to access adequate health care, and have done little to nothing about the rise of fascism that plagues our country today.
The activists say every time Democrats had control of both houses of Congress, they squandered the chance to secure reproductive and LGBTQ+ rights nationally.